Today, you'll find out what these 9 men did to end up on Kansas's death row. On December 11, 2000, one of the Carr brothers tried to rob 55-year-old Ann Walenta as she pulled into her driveway. When she put her car in reverse, she was shot 3 times. She died on January 2, 2001. On December 14, 2000, the Carr brothers got access to an apartment at around 10:30 p.m. Jason Belfort, Aaron Sander, and Brad Haka lived there while Heather Muller and Belfort's girlfriend Holly were visiting. Throughout the night, the brothers had their way with the women and forced the women and men to do inappropriate things to each other. The brothers also took several of the victims to ATMs to withdraw money. Once the brothers had their fun, they took the 5 out to a soccer field and shot them all in the head. Everyone died except for Holly, who survived when the bullet ricocheted off a clip in her hair. Both men were arrested the next day. Both are awaiting execution. On January 19, 2025, Scott Cheever was at the home of his friends Daryl and Belinda Cooper in Hilltop, Kansas. The group was using meth. At some point, Cheever learned the police were on the way to arrest him for an outstanding warrant, but he couldn't leave because his vehicle had a flat tire. Sheriff Matthew Samuels and 2 other officers arrived at the residence and were allowed to search the place. Cheever was hiding in an upstairs bedroom armed with 2 guns. He started shooting when he heard Samuels coming up the stairs. Cheever took shots at the other 2 officers and SWAT team members when they entered the home to arrest him. Cheever went to trial and tried to blame the drugs. The jury rejected his defense and found him guilty of murder and several other charges. He was sentenced to death. Kyle Trevor Flack was friends with Andrew Stout and Stephen White, and he occasionally spent time at Stout's home in Franklin County, Kansas. Stout, White, and Stout's girlfriend turned up dead on May 6, 2013, and the girlfriend's 18-month-old daughter was missing. Flack became the prime suspect in the crime, and on May 8, police took him in for questioning. Flack claimed that Mexican drug dealers killed Stout. Every time investigators pointed out discrepancies in Flack's story, he would add new details. Finally, he gave up and asked for a lawyer. On May 11th, investigators found the daughter of Stout's girlfriend dead in a suitcase. At trial, Flack was convicted of 2 counts of capital murder, 1 count of first-degree murder, 1 count of second-degree murder, and criminal possession of a firearm. He is awaiting execution. 5 people allegedly robbed Paul Elliott at his residence in Great Bend on February 12, 2004. Soon after the crime, rumors spread that Mikiala Martinez, who was reportedly involved in the crime, spoke to the cops. The 2 men who organized the robbery, Sidney Gleason and Damian Thompson, assumed Martinez snitched, and they wanted revenge. 9 days after the robbery, the 2 men pulled up on Martinez and fatally shot her boyfriend, Darren Warnke. Martinez was wounded in the gunfire. The 2 men kidnapped her and took her to a more deserted location, where they strangled her and then fatally shot her. Gleason and Thompson were arrested by the Kansas Bureau of Investigation the next day for the robbery of Elliott. 5 days after their initial arrest, they were charged with the murders of Warnke and Martinez. Thompson snitched soon after his arrest. In exchange for a 25-to-life sentence, he told police where Martinez's body was. He also agreed to testify against Gleason. However, Thompson later reneged and refused to testify. Prosecutors used Thompson's preliminary hearing testimony against Gleason at trial, and Gleason was convicted of capital murder and several other charges. He was sentenced to death for capital murder and 50 to life on the lesser charges. James Craig Kaler lived in Weatherford, Texas, with his wife Karen and their 3 children. In the summer of 2008, James moved to Columbia, Missouri, for a new job. His family stayed back but were planning to join him later in the year. Court records indicate that Karen told James she was interested in a woman she knew. James gave her the okay to engage in the relationship. He thought it would be a temporary thing, but it wasn't. In January 2009, Karen filed for divorce. 2 months later, she had James arrested for battery. Soon after that, he lost his job and moved in with his parents in Kansas. On November 28th, Karen and the kids were in Burlingame, Kansas, spending Thanksgiving with Karen's grandmother, Dorothy White. James showed up at White's home at around 6 p.m., walked in, and started shooting. He killed Karen, their 18-year-old daughter Emily, their 16-year-old daughter Lauren, and 89-year-old White. His 10-year-old son Sean was in the home, but James did not harm him. James was arrested the day after the quadruple murder. He was convicted of capital murder and is on death row. In early 1996, 20-year-old Pittsburgh State University student Carrie Williams and her roommate were being harassed. They had come home several times to find their apartment door open, and they received nasty phone calls from a male. On March 30th, 1996, Williams's body was discovered in the bedroom of her residence. She had been violated, cut, stabbed, and stomped. A detective investigating the crime saw Gary Claypass's name and number on Williams' caller's ID. The detective knew Claypass served 15 years in prison for murder and was on parole. On April 1st, 1996, Claypass was arrested in Missouri on unrelated charges. He admitted to stalking, violating, and killing Williams. A jury convicted him of capital murder and sent him to death row. John Edward Robinson was a fraudster in his 20s and 30s. In his 40s, his crimes escalated to murder. In 1984, he hired 19-year-old Paula Guyleen Gaudry to work for his consulting firm. He picked her up on September 1st, 1984. He was supposed to take her to the airport, however, she was never seen again. In 1985, he met 19-year-old Lisa Stasi. The teen had a 4-month-old named Tiffany. Lisa and Tiffany left her sister's place and got into a car with John on January 10, 1985. Lisa was never seen again. Soon after Lisa went missing, John contacted his brother and sister-in-law and told them he knew a woman that had deleted herself and left behind a baby they could adopt for $5,500 in legal fees. Soon, the couple had a new baby with authentic-looking adoption papers. Over the next 15 years, 6 more women who had dealt with Robinson disappeared. In June 2020, he was arrested after a woman accused him of violating her. On his farm, police found 21-year-old Isabella Lewicka and 27-year-old Suzette Truton dead in drums. As the investigation progressed, authorities learned about the baby John handed over to his brother and sister-in-law in the 80s. DNA tests confirmed that the girl was the daughter of Lisa Stasi. Robinson was convicted for the murders of Trouton, Lewicka, and Stasi in Kansas. He received 2 death sentences and 1 life without parole sentence. In 2003, he pleaded guilty to 5 murders in Missouri. He was sentenced to 5 life without parole terms. Now 81 years old, he has never revealed the locations of his 6 missing victims. Jody Sanderholm practiced with her Cowley Community College dance team in Arkansas City on the late morning of January 5, 2007. Soon after that, she went missing. The investigation led authorities to question Justin Thurber later that evening. They learned that Thurber's father picked him up near Cowley County State Fishing Lake. They also learned Thurber frequently visited the Kaw Wildlife Area. On January 7th, authorities searched the Kaw Wildlife Area and saw footprints of Thurber's shoes. They moved the search to Cowley State Fishing Lake and saw more of Thurber's shoe prints, dance shoes, Sanderholm's wallet, and mail addressed to her parents. 2 days later, authorities found Sanderholm's naked body in a woodpile at the Kaw Wildlife Area. Thurber was convicted of her murder and is awaiting execution for his crimes.